All right, we are live. Thank you so much for everyone who's joining me in today's video. This is a big one because the National Association of Realtors just settled a lawsuit last week for $418 million. And it's really going to change the landscape of our housing market, in my personal opinion. As you guys may know, I have Jim Black here, who has been you've been a loan officer for what, 20 years, Jim?
Yeah, 23 years, 7 days, and 9 hours, but who's counting?
So yeah, I think people appreciate your insights because you've been in the industry for so long. I've been a real estate agent in the Sacramento area for 11 years as of last February. And we're going to give you guys our honest opinion about the impacts of the housing market, who are the losers here, who are the winners, and just in general, what happened. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Thank you so much for joining me. Kevin, nice to see you here. Kevin's been a long-time subscriber of my channel. Appreciate you. Coors Light. Yeah, nothing changes. Yeah, exactly. A lot of things have changed in your reality. Exactly. And good afternoon to you. And Steve-O, hopefully Steve-O is here. He's a long-time subscriber as well. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in because I have so much to share. I want to provide what happened because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And Jim and I are going to talk about the impacts of housing market, buyers and sellers, etc. So let me share my screen with you guys and go over an FAQ section on the National Association of Realtors website here. So it says here, the National Association of Realtors today, which is posted on March 15th, announced an agreement that would end litigation of claims brought on behalf of home sellers related to broker commissions. The agreement would resolve claims against NAR and also on top of over 1 million NAR members as well, all state and local realtor association and all association-owned MLSs and brokerages with a NAR member as the principal that has a residential transaction volume in 2022 of $2 billion or less. So big companies such as Home Services America, which is Berkshire Hathaway, and Intero Services, those are excluded from this settlement here. It says the settlement, which is subject to court approval, it's not finalized yet, could take months to be finalized, makes it clear that NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing in connection with multiple listing service cooperative compensation model. What basically means is that the model says that agents can cooperate on commissions. In other words, the traditional way of buyers or agents getting paid right now is due to sellers paying the listing agent, which is a seller's agent, and top of that, paying the buyer's agent as well. That's what's going on, or what has been going on ever since the 1990s. That's what it says right there, introduced in the 1990s, in response to calls from consumer protection advocates for buyer reps. Under the agreement, NAR would pay that $418 million over approximately 4 years. It goes on to say here that NAR fought to include all members, but they did include 1 million members who are included in this settlement here. It also says here NAR has agreed to put in place, this is the two big changes that are going to impact the housing market and real estate industry as a whole here. It says NAR has agreed to put in place a new MLS rule prohibiting offers of broker compensation on the MLS. This would mean that offers of broker compensation could be communicated via the MLS, but they could continue to be an option consumers can pursue off the MLS through negotiation and consulting with real estate professionals. Maybe, Jim, you can kind of provide what exactly that means.
Great, no pressure. All right, so on my
Okay,
end,
well,
how I read it.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
So how I read this, first of all, is NAR represents all real estate realtor professionals in the United States. They tried their best to do a good job of protecting as many of their members as they can. In their announcement, they announced that they protected over 1 million realtors, and they try to protect all the companies of a certain size or less. reason why that's important to understand is because in the settlement, the plaintiff, aka the attorneys and homeowners, are trying to make sure they get something of value out of the settlement. So they left the largest companies with the deepest pockets still to have to negotiate for their settlement. So again, NAR tried to protect all of the companies that could, the companies with the biggest pocketbooks, to have more settlement room to negotiate. So what this means again is that realtors no longer are mandated to get any type of MLS amount of commission published, but their goal is to make sure that the consumers are aware that a buyer now is obligated to potentially pay for the commissions for a buy-side realtor. So again, MLS is now basically shifting, and they're no longer really going to be wearing the hat to control all the communication around compensation. Each seller and listing agent will have the ability to build into their contract a commission that can be offered to a buyer's agent. A great way to look at this is if you have a home, for example, and you want to replace your flooring, you can put the flooring in yourself if you want to, but that flooring probably won't be done as nicely or professionally as hiring a professional person to come in and install that for you. So be careful what this is going to do to a lot of first-time home buyers and a lot of the people that don't have a lot of additional funds to pay for services. Because again, traditionally in the past, the seller has been paying for the buy-side representation of a buyer on their asset. Now, the buyer is going to have to find a way through negotiation or cash out of their own pocket or an innovative loan program to now reward their representation. And I believe that everyone still needs representation. And I think we're also going to see a byproduct of this is a lot of discount brokers, which have been around for 20 plus years. Discount brokers are not new. You're going to see a lot of people do what's called dual agency. Hey, Jason, you're a listing agent on a property. Can you represent me as the buyer and your seller? Dual agency, the biggest word in the whole definition of dual agency has to do with fiduciary responsibility to your client. Fiduciary responsibility means you have the best interest of your client in mind. How can someone be a fiduciary on both the buy side and sale side at the same time? It's impossible or very hard to do. If I'm representing a seller, very challenging, right? Very challenging. So that's going to be the dynamic of some brokerages will go to a discount model, which I don't think is helping anyone out for that matter. Buyers need protection. Buyers need professional consultative opinions. They need to get reports, understand what they're doing. They need advice. And I do believe this could affect the lower income or first-time home buyer markets.
Let's talk about,
because those borrowers are already strapped.
Let's talk about who's going to be impacted here, because let's just kind of take a step back here. So there's two main factors that or two new rules that were enacted. So overall, before the settlement, you can go into the local MLS or the multiple listing service as a real estate agent. You can see what the buyer's compensation is. Is it 2.5%, 3.5% of the sales price, or something different? That field in the MLS nationwide is going to go to 0. It's not going to be a field on the MLS. So listing agents who are representing sellers are no longer going to be able to put what the concession, or not the concession, the commission is on the MLS. But it still can be negotiated, just like Jim said. So if you're a home buyer, you can say, I'm willing to pay X dollars for your house, but I want the seller to pay for my agent. And that's what typically has been going on. Sellers have been paying the listing agent and the buyer's agent's commission. So what they're saying here, they're going to get rid of that offer of compensation to the buyer's broker on the MLS. but they can still offer, the seller can still offer a concession to the buyer, but it can't say, we'll only give this to you if you use this to pay your agent. They can't do that, but they can offer a concession. In other words, a closing cost credit. Maybe it's $10,000. The buyer can use that to pay for their agent. They can do that to buy for new flooring, etc. So I just kind of want to take a step back here, because that's one of the two biggest impacts or changes that we're going to see in the real estate industry starting in July this year. Well, let's talk about the second one too, because the second one is also a big one as well. And we'll talk about who's going to be impacted by this, who are the winners and losers here. But let's have a look at this as well, because here's another point they change here as well. If I get my computer up and running here. So that's number one. So they can't offer commissions through the MLS, but offers of compensation help make professional representation more accessible, decrease, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's move on here. It says further, NAR has agreed to enact a new rule that would require MLS participants or real estate agents working with buyers to enter into written agreements with their buyers. This is called a buyer's brokers agreement. This, in my opinion, is actually a step in the right direction. What this basically is saying a contract between the buyer's agent and the buyer, and saying here that here is how much I'm going to be charging for my services. So they are going to require this buyer's representation document to be signed by the buyer's agent and the buyer prior to viewing any houses. So that agreement will lay out all the fees that the buyer's agent is actually going to ask for from the home buyer or potentially from the home seller. So those are two main impacts and changes to the housing market, or the real estate industry, really, that's really going to impact the housing market here. But yeah, sorry to jump in there, Jim, but I want to kind of provide that because those are two big changes that we haven't seen in decades. So if you want to talk about, like, let's talk about who the biggest, sorry, I think there's a little bit delay here. Let's talk about maybe the biggest winners, and what do you think about, Jim, with this? Who do you think the biggest winners of this settlement really are? And we'll talk about the losers as well.
Yes. So I believe those companies who have all the data will be big winners. The people that have large databases, the listing agents that have a big reputational strength in their market and their community will always be on top of this. And I believe companies that offer more than one product will also win. And what I mean by that is, if you offer mortgages and real estate, for example, you may be able to offset some of the expenses in one of those categories to help a buyer be able to afford the other services. So what I mean for that, for example, let's say you're working with a real estate company who has a mortgage company also. Maybe the mortgage company element of that entity can offset some of the costs by giving credits towards non-reoccurring closing costs from the mortgage part to help that consumer then save funds to be able to compensate the realtor. Again, each community is different. We're going to see a lot of dynamics happen. I do see, though, companies that have a one-stop shop approach that add more value are going to be highly desired over discount brokerages. People want the same level of service, if not more, for the same cost. Discount brokerages, on the other hand, are the opposite. You're getting less knowledge, less participation, less services for a discount. So I believe if you go to one-stop real estate mortgage companies, you will have more services offered for less overall cost, which hopefully can offset some of those expenses that the seller is no longer paying for.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It definitely does. And let me comment below if you guys have any questions regarding that. But let me just recap that. So Jim's saying we're both at Revest Homes. Jim's one of the co-founders of Revest Homes. I joined. We'll talk about that in a different video, but I joined forces with Jim about a month ago. And so one of the big advantages, this wasn't really planned, but this is really a good advantage, is that Revest Homes offers loans, but also real estate sales services. So what basically Jim's saying here, if you use us to get a loan to buy a house, but also use one of our real estate agents, there could be some concessions given to the home buyer, and that's advantageous to the home buyer, especially if they have to pay for all or a portion of their buyer's agent's fees. Hope that makes sense, guys. All right, so let's talk about the. I think that's a big winner for
And
companies
another
like Revest
example.
Homes. I'm sorry, I think there's a delay when we're talking. Let's go ahead, Jim. Can you hear me?
Can I share an update also? Another example of that? I can hear you, yes.
For sure.
Another example of that is home builders. Home builders offset their mortgage expenses to allow a better option for their buyers. So it's a very similar model to a home builder having either real estate or mortgage or insurance services that they can offset expenses with. So again, a family or household is getting an overall better experience by getting more products, as long as those products are competitive and as long as those products are specialized and customized, then that's a better approach than working with a discount company. So traditional real estate companies right now are at a disadvantage to hybrid models that have the ability to offset expenses. Again, each market has different dynamics. They have different variables. So what works in one market might not work in the other. But I would say, to me, it's very clear in a complicated property sale where a property may have issues on the property. Maybe it's got a bridge or septic or well or something unique, solar. You're going to want to have representation. And I think that the fact that this commission shift is happening is still going to be a valuable thing to pay to make sure you know before you owe on one of the largest decisions in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point about the home builders, because just touring home builders in the greater Sacramento area, virtually every single one of them is offering at least a $10,000 closing cost credit for home buyers if you use their in-house lender. So kind of similar situation with Revest houses generally. So biggest winners, we're talking about companies like home builders, Revest Homes. Also, in my opinion as well, listing agents and sellers are big winners here as well. Keep in mind, the commission paid to the listing agent, which is a seller's agent, is not affected, it hasn't changed due to the settlement. So listing agents will not be impacted by this. On top of that, sellers could potentially net more for the house if they have to pay less in buyer's commissions. Another side note, though, is that it's going to vary quite a bit by the area. I imagine some areas you'll have no commissions being offered. Maybe you'll have the 2.5%, 3.5%, whatever it is. It's going to vary quite a bit. But I think that let's talk about this now. But there's a lot of talk about how the settlement is going to cause home prices to fall. I don't know about you, but if I was going to sell my house this year, I would not discount my sales price or my asking price just because I could potentially save money on the commission side. In other words, if I don't have to pay the buyer's agent commission, or if I pay a less amount, just because of that, I'm not going to ask for a lower price for my house. Home prices are not dictated by commissions. They're dictated by the balance between supply and demand, and also comparable sales. If my neighbor sold their house for $1 million, I also want to sell my house for $1 million, all other things being equal. I'm not going to decrease my asking price by the concessions or the decrease in commissions that I potentially would not have to pay. What are your thoughts about that? It's probably the biggest misnomer I see out there, that sellers are suddenly going to decrease their prices and buyers going to be rejoicing in the streets. What's your thoughts, Jim?
I believe that the listing agents are going to have to be better negotiators with their clients up front when they sign a listing agreement. I think they're going to have to be very consultative in their approach to attract as many buyers to get the most exposure they can on the property. To do that, I do believe they have to incent any real estate professional to attract buyers to their property. I do agree with you that I believe values will actually ironically go higher in certain markets because they'll offer an increase to offset the expense or perceived expense of paying a buyer's commission. So, for example, if a traditional buyer's commission in your marketplace was 2.5%, I believe a lot of listing agents will increase the purchase price by up to 2.5%, and then offer that as a credit to the buyer's agent side. That way, that seller still gets the same net benefit, and that expense is not paid out of pocket from the buyer, but it's paid out of the potential value difference. So I do believe values will be inflated, especially when you bring up supply and demand, which is so critical right now. Interest rates, while they're very important, payment is even more important when people make a decision about buying a property. They got to live somewhere. Inventory is still very low traditionally. Supply is not growing as fast as the demand for housing. Therefore, I don't see values going down in most markets. I see this dynamic shift being a strategy to give the seller more proceeds or more gain on their asset and having it be basically paid potentially by the buyer. Again, buyer, TJ brings up, buyer is getting screwed again. I look at this as the long term. If I'm buying a property today, my hope is that I'm buying it for what's most important: my family, my shelter, the environment, the schools, the community, the commute to work, whatever those things are that are important to a family. And hopefully in the long run, this offset of commission is not as big as the offset of the gain of the lifestyle or the long-term benefit of owning a house. I don't like the fact that we have to have buyers pay any more fees. I would love to see the government come out and Fannie, Freddie, and FHA and VA come out with some guidelines around this to allow us to have real estate commissions count as non-reoccurring closing costs that we can actually even finance as lenders. Have the lender contribute. We can contribute as a company that owns a real estate and mortgage company. Let's all work together to find a solution. This should not all be bared by the borrower, because it'll make it be that much harder for the first-time home buyer to be able to afford anything. And that's the last thing that the government wants to have.
No, absolutely. It's well said. I talk about on the channel all the time, lack of housing affordability is impacting demand. A lot of people are priced out of the housing market or just opting not to buy. And so the biggest losers, in my opinion, Jim's talking about, like, if you buy a house, in the long term, you build wealth. People make decisions to buy or sell based on lifestyle decisions. So that's absolutely correct. What I worry about is first-time home buyers, people using a minimum down payment of 3 to 3.5%. They don't have additional funds to pay for an additional down payment. So why would they have more funds to pay for their buyer's agent? So in my opinion, the people really getting screwed here are actually the first-time home buyers, especially those who are looking or only have like minimum funds. Because let's just say an example. If the home seller is not willing to pay for your agent, then of course the agent's going to ask their buyers to pay for their commission. But they can't afford it. What do? Goes directly to the listing agent, I guess, or just give up. So I actually did some digging for you guys, and I found that based on surveys from the National Association of Realtors, they've been doing this every month, around 30% of all sales go to a first-time home buyer. And Jim knows that a popular loan product for first-time home buyers is an FHA loan. That's only a 3.5% down payment. The reason why people use, or one of the reasons why people use that loan product, is because they don't have 5% or 20% down for a conventional loan. So, in my opinion, again, the people most impacted negatively from this is people who are cash strapped, FHA, VA loans, for example, buyers. And this is really going to impact those sales. So, one thing I was talking to Jim earlier today about is that one reason I could see, or one scenario in which I could see that home prices could decrease is what would happen if first-time home buyers, FHA buyers, VA buyers were to fall big time. That would mean we see a big decrease in sales. I talk about this on channel. Think of it as think of housing inventory as a bathtub, right? The water level is housing inventory, the amount of houses for sale. How do you increase housing inventory? Well, you plug up the drain or sales, or you actually put more water into the bathtub. More water would be more new listings. So, what would happen if we saw a huge decrease in sales? That would cause the water level or inventory to increase as that drain is getting plugged up, but more new listings are hitting the market every day, causing the water level to rise. So, if that was to happen, up significantly here. And by the way, we already have inventory up big time compared to a year ago, up by about 20%, according to altosresource.com and realtor.com. If inventory levels were to start increasing big time, that would put downward pressure on prices. So that'd be one scenario in which I would see that home prices could potentially fall, but we're not going to see home sellers discounting their own houses just because potentially they don't have to pay a buyer's agent commission. All right, so let's see if anyone has any questions here. Jimmy, you have anything to follow you want to add? If not, no worries.
I do. One of the other things about the settlement was that there is a mandated buyer broker agreement that has to be signed. So here's an interesting dilemma. I'm a first-time home buyer, and I want Jason Walter to be my buyer's agent. I sign a buyer broker agreement. What that means is I'm paying Jason Walter for his services to represent me for a specific period of time to buy a property. So let's just say that's 2.5%. Jason goes and shows me properties for sale. What if some of those properties do not offer compensation to the buyer's agent? So on one hand, myself as a buyer is obligated to pay Jason Walter, the realtor, that way, sorry. On the other hand, there's no money coming from the listing agent to pay for it. So again, everything has to be negotiable. So that might be part of the negotiated contract for Jason to represent me to say, this we want the seller to give a credit to offset 2.5% and maybe even other things, maybe lender costs or new carpet offset or paint or something like that, some other thing. So these negotiations are not going to be as straightforward as they have been in the past. And that's why I think professionals that are consultative and are on top of their game and good negotiators will be very successful because they'll be able to represent their client to the best of their ability by knowing this information before they write an offer. Because if I've signed a buyer broker agreement with Jason that's good for 12 months and the seller doesn't want to pay us anything, Jason's going to need to know that up front before he negotiates to help me buy that property. Because that is a dynamic shift there that may be one of the byproducts of this. There may be a willing buyer, but not a willing seller to be able to have a coming of the minds. And so that's going to be a dynamic that we'll see how that rolls out over time. Another dynamic too to be aware of is that companies like Zillow and Redfin have a lot of data. They have a lot of home knowledge. They have a big database of followers. They also control a lot of the data. So I would not be surprised to see these other conglomerates create their own edition or rendition of the MLS. I could see companies having their own database of properties for sale, so that it's going to be a situation where we might not be able to see all the inventory that's available if if people aren't offering commission or whatnot. So you're going to see a lot of interesting things develop in the next 3 months. And again, this takes place in July of this year. But I think smart companies are already implementing in mid-July. Smart companies are already implementing these things, I believe. And ironically, this has already been going on in one of the MLSs in the Northwest. The Pac Northwest has been a really good case study up in Washington to show that over the last, I think now 2.5 years, they've had these changes already implemented to their marketplace. And the stats have shown that it really has not affected commissions very much at all. If anything, commissions have gone higher on more complicated transactions. So maybe it's a farm with a working, a funky property. That may dictate more commissions for a buy-side agent to help explore all of the different disclosures and reports and make sure that it's the right property to buy. So that case study in the Northwest, I think, is giving some states peace of mind. California Association of Realtors is a forward-thinking entity. So here in California, there's not going to be a whole lot of change to our contract. So it's going to be very interesting.
Steven, a lot of the contracts we have in, yeah, I mean, a lot of the contracts we have, like as real estate agents in California, we use forms from the California Association of Realtors, and a lot of those forms are not like the listing agent. The listing agreement, for example, does not encompass these changes that could be enacted in mid-July. So what happens is going to vary widely by the area. It's going to be very, very choppy, to say the least. I can imagine like a home seller down the street offering 3% to the buyer's agent versus the guy next door also selling their house, but offering no commissions as a buyer's agent, and potentially as a home buyer as well. You might be more interested in that house that is offering a commission because your agent, if there's no commissions being offered by the seller, is going to ask you to pay for it. So it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be bumpy, to say the least. So a good comment here. I think that what is going on is going to happen to is lots of dual agents, meaning a buyer is going to go directly to the listing agent and be represented by the listing agent. We talked about that a little bit. Definitely a conflict of interest in which the listing agent, the seller's agent, wants to get the highest price, but a buyer's agent wants to get the lowest price for their client. So definitely a conflict of interest there. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that one of the biggest winners here as well are real estate attorneys over the next several years, because I could see a scenario in which dual agency could increase due to this settlement as well. It's going to get messy, to say the least. And I, in general, I don't want anything to do with any dual agencies, especially this. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays all out. All right.
And also another thing I bring up also, I do believe that the negotiation period, normally when you submit an offer, and Jason, you know this better than I do, when you submit an offer, normally you get a response within 24 to 48 hours, right? Yeah. It's pretty quick. I believe you're going to have an active negotiation period, which is much bigger and longer and complicated. So for example, I think traditionally you helped me buy a house and I'd hear a response back 2 days or sooner. I think you could take 3 to 5 days now going back and forth with a negotiation to get all these credits and things figured out to make sure all parties agree on all terms. So what it could do is slow down the speed of the transaction and also create a lot of stop and go negotiations. What if we're midstream negotiating with a seller, Jason, you're my buyer's agent, and another offer comes in that doesn't want buyer's commission, that's all cash? What happens if other elements come in mid-negotiation? So I think we're going to have a lot more of a drawn-out period of negotiation and understanding the disclosures. Each company will have their own disclosure forms around this, I'm sure. And again, going back to dual agency, just to make sure it's clear. Dual agency means you are a fiduciary for two parties at the same time, which is impossible. You cannot represent the best interests of two parties on different sides of a transaction. Jason, as my buyer's agent, wants to get me the lowest price I can on the property with the best terms of purchasing a home. The listing agent or seller's agent wants to get the highest price with the least amount of concessions or highest proceeds for their seller. If that party is the same party, how can they operate in the best interest of both parties? And I see Steve 4W, TW's comment, which is hard because it isn't dual agency legal in some states. Every state is different. So please know that you want to work with a local professional in the state that understands the laws. Jason is an amazing referral source for a lot of agents throughout the country. He has a network of great agents. But again, each state is going to have a different way of interpreting this settlement. And companies will have a different way of looking at it. But again, back to Jason's point earlier, supply and demand is the fundamental question in every market, in every situation. If there's too much supply, it's a buyer's market. If there's too much demand, it's a seller's market. Those dynamics are not going to shift as much unless there's some major economic event or home builders turn the green light on and build 10 times as many homes as they're building right now.
Yeah, his question about dual agency, it is illegal in some states. In California, it is illegal. Potentially not the best scenario or option, but it is legal in California. Francine says in South Carolina, it's legal if both sides agree. Yeah, so it varies by the state here. Yeah, it's just wild. And Steve says, yeah, this is going to be hot.
This brings up again.
Sure.
Yeah.
What?
And again, what's important to realize, again, this whole discussion is just work with professionals that have a vested interest in you. That's the whole name of the game, no matter what happens. Work with people that add value and make sure that they have your best interest in mind. If they don't, probably someone else better out there for you to work with. Again, every market's different. Your specific situation is unique. Everyone's got different life objectives and goals and life events. So just work with people that are vested and knowledgeable about this and are forward thinking and are ahead of the changes. You want proactive professionals in both real estate and lending and insurance and your CPA and financial planner and all that stuff.
For sure. Yeah, Coors Light, must love the beer, brings up a good point too, because depending on your experience level. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you have no idea what the process is of buying a house in the area you're looking to buy. Maybe you are an experienced buyer, but you're buying a house in an area that you know nothing about. You don't know if there's like funky like septic tanks, easements, if it's a wildfire zone, etc. And so the impacts to our housing market and to home buyers is going to vary quite a bit. If you're a very experienced home buyer, you may not need to you may not feel you need to be represented by a buyer's agent. But if you're a first-time home buyer, I mean, is it in your best interest to go directly to the listing agent? I would argue against that, in my personal opinion. Anyone else have any questions? We'll kind of wrap this video up. We've been steady around 200 people watching the live stream, Jim. So I appreciate everyone watching today's video. Hit the like button for sure. Let's see if anyone has any questions. If you guys have any questions, then put question in the chat, and we will try to answer any questions, because this is a complicated situation here that is going to be ever changing, I think, this year.
I would also suggest that we do updates, Jason, every other week. Yeah, I think we should share success stories when we find we're in the marketplace, of how people are navigating this. I'd love to support you in that. So just give success stories and just share them. If it's in a post, if it's in a video, the more we can provide your viewers and make sure that people are empowered to make good decisions, the better off we all are, because we want to make sure everyone is treated fairly. We want to make sure that everyone has the knowledge to be successful in their goals of buying or selling a property. And again, this is complicated. The settlement is very unique and very different. It affects a lot of people. And there's so much misinformation out there. So know that real estate commissions have always been negotiable. They've never been fixed at one amount.
Yeah.
I personally never paid the same commission on any property that I've ever bought. So it's all unique and different and customized. And that's why working with professionals is truly the most important thing.
Yeah, well said. Belief says if the selling costs got reduced, shouldn't more sellers be on the market? So there's a lot of headlines saying, oh, the 6% commission is gone. The settlement only says that, hey, that little field on the MLS that says, hey, how much the seller is willing to pay, the buyer's agent is going to be gone as of mid-July if that actually just goes through. So selling costs didn't necessarily get reduced, but they are going to be negotiated for the buyer's agent. So I just want to be clear on that. Are there any other lawsuits down the pipe for NAR? This settlement, as far as I know, Jim, is basically a settlement that would exclude them from future lawsuits, is based on my understanding. Is that what you understand as well?
The only part, yeah, the only part that has not been discussed yet is the Department of Justice, their stance on collusion, because they believe collusion, the word collusion is used in a lot of these discussions. Collusion is basically, fixed pricing, which is something that the government does not like to see in any industry. It's monopolistic behavior. So the Department of Justice is probably weighing in on this discussion probably in the next month or two here. So when that shoe drops, I think we'll have complete clarity on where NAR stands as an industry leader. And then one of the largest lobbyists in the country is real estate. NAR is one of the top 5 lobbyists in the United States. They have a lot of power in DC, but the Department of Justice has even more power. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. And we'll keep you astute to all the changes that come.
Yeah, I think we should do this video pretty often as an update on this, because it's going to be ever changing. One thing I looked into as well, that $418 million settlement that they agreed to, they're going to have to pay that off over the next 4 years. It states in a press release, by the way, I have a link to a couple of resources for you guys if you guys want to learn more about this from the National Association of Realtors website. But they're going to have to pay this settlement over 4 years. I looked at their net assets, just being an accountant in my previous career, and the net assets was only $706 million, I think it was. Let's just call it a little over 700 million, something like that. And so I'm just curious, how is the Realtors Association going to pay for this? They stated that association membership dues that I, as a member of NAR, pay on a monthly basis is not going to increase this year, but will happen in the next couple of years here. How will they pay for this giant lawsuit here? So that's to be determined. Alaska has overall, will consumers save money? Not if they have to pay for their buyer's agent. It's going to be just the opposite. If they have to pay for their buyer's agent commission, all of it or a portion of it, they're actually going to be out more money and not saving more money. Kind of go ahead, Jim.
I have an answer for you too that might be what I like better.
Awesome.
I believe a transaction in real estate will have more transparency and more information to allow the consumers to know all the costs involved. And knowing all the costs involved, hopefully save more money by working with the right professionals. But you should not skimp out on having representation, because properties are not all perfect. If properties were all the exact same, then this would be a very new point and be very easy to operate and navigate. But where I live, for example, where Jason lives, you can live next to a very nice home, next to a rundown property that needs a lot of TLC. So we don't have conformity in most markets throughout the United States. Again, where we think this is going to have a bigger impact is around home builders, because they have conforming products. They have cookie cutter homes, right? If you have a marketplace where everything is the same, this could definitely play a bigger role. But if your house is unique and has unique features, I want a professional to give me their opinion. I want to have inspections to make sure the fireplace works, or the septic tank works, or whatever, solar works. those are all things I think you have to pay for. And if you don't pay for them, in terms of advice or knowledge or expertise, probably comes back to bite you more than that in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, it's well said, because what's the old adage? You get what you pay for. You go to Nordstrom and you buy expensive clothes there, but you're gonna get great service. You go to Ross, no one's gonna help you. Yeah, and buying arguably the most expensive asset you will in your entire life, you want to make sure someone's experienced and someone you feel like like, and trust, rather than just picking someone who's going to do it for like $500 or something like that, a low price. Question: Coors Light. When do they plan on rolling out changes? These changes are not finalized. NAR is confident they'll be finalized soon, but they plan to roll it out mid-July this year. Won't this make it more unaffordable for first-time home buyers? Yeah, exactly. We touched on that. Maybe you joined a little bit late. First-time home buyers, people have minimum down payment or minimum funds for buying a house. They're using a FHA loan, for example, with a 3.5% minimum down payment. Arguably may not have the funds to pay for their buyer's agent. And if the seller is not willing to buy or pay for the agent's commissions on the buy side, what is the person going to do? It could make housing more unaffordable because of that. But like Jim talked about, it could vary by the company you choose to work with. If you want to work with Revest Houses or Revest Homes, for example, then potentially could be some concessions there if you want to use a loan and a sales rep at the same time. Let's see if anyone has any other questions here. Why Texas?
I also think, Jason, that I have one more point.
Yep.
Okay, I have one more point to think about. I do believe that you're going to see financial products come out, home loan products and things of that nature, that will adjust to this issue. I think you'll see smart companies offer unique products to help offset some of this expense, because it is a burden. Cash out of pocket is a burden for first-time home buyers. They have moving expenses. They got to buy furniture. They got to paint. They got to buy that 48-inch TV or maybe 70-inch TV, whatever it is. There's moving expenses and life changes, and we want to make sure as a lender that there's a reserve someone has in case there's more expenses than they think. So.
Yep. Well said. Steve 4TW, by the way, first time seeing your live and maybe videos. Cool. Welcome to the channel. I've been doing this since 2019, but I don't often do live streams. But Jim and I were talking about doing live streams more frequently, like maybe once per week. So if you guys have an interest in that, please leave me a comment below. We talked about that the other day, last week, I think, Jim, and haven't got around to picking a time. But I think that'd be really good to have you as a expert in the loan side, me being somewhat knowledgeable regarding home sales. In Sacramento, being a realtor for 11 years, I think that'd be really beneficial having you on the live stream.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little bit sarcastic. All right.
Great.
Do you think homes, we'll wrap this up really soon here, but do you think homes that won't offer buyer commission will get less interest? I could definitely see that. I mean, if you have like an area in which, a neighborhood in which all the sellers are willing to pay the buyer's agent, let's just say 2.5%, 3%, but you as a home seller are offering nothing, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, buyers may not even be able to buy your house if they don't have the funds to pay their agent. So yeah, it's going to be messy. But yeah, I think that if you're not offering a buyer's commission where everyone else is, good luck. All right. See if anyone else has any questions. I'm a prospective home buyer in the near future for the first time. Awesome. This is Jasper Roberts. What impact would this have if using a VA home loan? Jim, you want to tackle that one? Jimmy, there's a delay.
So this impacts it. Yeah. This impacts it greatly. VA currently does not allow you to get paid pay a realtor outside of this transaction. So VA and FHA have not yet addressed this. They need to address it like yesterday. So I'd imagine in the next month or so, we'll get some clarity on it.
So just to clarify, you're saying that FHA buyers using an FHA loan or a VA loan aren't able to pay for their buyer's agent out of pocket. Is that what you just said? Is Jim frozen?
Correct. We can't fund it in any type of financing elements. They can't get a credit back for it. So I feel worse for veterans right now. It's a whole nother topic, but the veterans VA funding fee, for example, is one fee that I don't believe veterans should pay. Unfortunately, the government makes them pay 3% to use a VA loan, which is called the VA funding fee. Disabled veterans of certain levels of disability get a free VA fee, but it's a very tough situation right now because there are categories of loans that are going to have a big challenge to figure out. So again, work with trusted lenders that know how to navigate this and have solutions and backup plans. A VA loan might not be the right solution today. Maybe you can refinance into that later, but right now that's not going to be a really good solution until we get clarity on what we can and cannot offer through credits for veterans and also FHA buyers.
Yeah, so there are going to be a lot of announcements for different types of loan products and from the Realtor Association. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate everyone joining. We still have 200 people watching. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your afternoon to hear us talk about this topic that is challenging. I spent hours kind of figuring out, scratching my head about who are the real big winners and losers here. And I understand all the reasons why they're doing this, but gosh, I feel bad for first-time home buyers who have minimum down payment, minimum funds, who might be negatively impacted by this. I feel for you guys. In any case, Jim, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on the video.
Thank you guys very much.
All right, awesome. You guys have an awesome day. We'll see you on the next video.